Hi, I'm Josh, and I'm so grateful you've chosen to spend some time with me as I talk about the board games that I played in January 2024. Now, while I am recording this in February, it is almost the end of the month. It's the 27th of February as I record this here, so I'm sure you won't be seeing this till sometime in March, and that's partly because I've been doing a lot of nursing of sick kids over the past 4 weeks. Even though last fall we got our updated COVID shots as well as our flu shots, yes, I do take health matters very seriously, both as a paramedic and as somebody who lives with chronic serious medical problems, as well as someone who just has empathy for other people. And so I want to make sure myself and my kids are protected as best as possible. Despite all that, my younger son Wyatt still came down with his second bout of COVID now. And then when I told my ex that he had COVID, she asked me if I could keep the kids with me for a full week. And so I said, of course. If there's one thing that I'm equipped to do, it's to be a full-time nurse. So that's what I focused on. And thanks to being vaccinated, neither myself nor his older brother ended up picking up COVID again. And he himself, although he was quite sick for a few days with a high fever, it never progressed to the point where it was looking especially serious or anything like that. So definitely still grateful for the vaccinations. And then a couple weeks later, when he was finally pretty much all better, he ended up going to a sleepover with some friends and picking up a viral illness. And so he was sick again. And then his older brother Evan got sick. And they sort of passed these viral illnesses back and forth. Thankfully, like I said, again, they were vaccinated for the flu, so they didn't get anything super serious. I mean, my older son is currently on antibiotics and a steroid puffer for some ear and lung issues, but we're pretty well protected and we just have to get through these annoyances. So that's been pretty much my last month. And on the topic of family, the month of January from a board game perspective was all about the family gaming. I know it's very weird of me to be talking about Christmas by the time you're seeing this in March, but my own family Christmas get-together did happen right at the beginning of January, just a couple days after New Year's. So I had the whole family over here. I hosted it and we had a little gift exchange. So basically we each bought a few kind of cheap presents so that everybody present, I didn't mean to do that, but so that everybody there could have essentially a $20 gift to open up in kind of a open a new gift or steal one that somebody's previously opened type of exchange. And so I had picked up a few board games to wrap up, and in the process of all that, I did end up with a couple of new games. One of the games is one of the gifts that I had purchased, and that is a game called Prehistories. It was actually a $30 game, I believe, that was on sale for $20, so it was one of the ones that I contributed to the gift exchange, and my youngest son Wyatt just happened to choose it in the gift exchange and open it up and thought it looked cool. So ultimately we ended up keeping that one that I had purchased. And then myself, the gift that I ended up with was a game called One Night Ultimate Supervillains that another family had brought for the gift exchange. So we ended up playing both of those new acquisitions this month as well, so I'm going to be talking about them shortly. And why don't we do that right now, in fact? So there were the two new acquisitions, and I had a total of 10 different games played for the month of January. As always, I'm going to go through these 10 games in order of my lowest rated game to my highest rated game of the month. And the first one we're going to start with is a game I played on Board Game Arena called Open Face Chinese Poker. Now, as somebody who is a fan of Texas Hold'em poker, I found this game on Board Game Arena, saw that it has a solo play version, and thought, oh, I don't really know anything about it, let's give it a try. I busted out in the first round of the first game. Then in the second game, I busted out on the 6th round. I don't actually have much memory of what the game was about at this point. Probably played it over 6 weeks ago, and it was just kind of such a forgettable card game that I don't really remember much about it. In fact, in my notes here, basically all I wrote was I'm not really seeing the point of the game, at least from a solo experience. So it didn't even feel like a proper game, and I only ended up rating it 3 out of 10, so just really wasn't all that fun. The next game on the list Although the rating's the same, the amount of fun I had with it was much higher, which maybe doesn't make much sense, but let me explain. The next game is One Night Ultimate Supervillains, the game I got in the family Christmas gift exchange. And if you're familiar with deduction or social deduction games like Werewolf, Mafia, that sort of thing, you will understand the whole idea of One Night Ultimate Supervillains being a one-night version. It is a very shortened, streamlined version of one of these social deduction games, which is one thing that I did appreciate about it, because my temperament just isn't suited to social deduction type of games. So these typically are games where you have a secret role. Just as basic examples, in the game of Werewolf, you'll have the werewolves and you'll have the villagers who are on opposite teams and trying to eliminate each other from the game. And then just by talking to other players, you're supposed to try to convince them of what your role is and what your motivations are. And the first thing is, I'm just not that much into lying in general. I don't necessarily have any super big moral problems with it per se, because I think that there are probably instances where lying to somebody is the kinder thing to do. But in general, I just don't see it as a great thing to be doing, even if obviously it's just a game, we're just having fun. But I think the bigger part of that is, in general, in life in general, I don't have huge motivation to convince people of things that I believe to be true. So if I'm trying to say to somebody, no, I'm not a supervillain or whatever the character in the game is, I'm this character, and they say, well, I don't believe you, my normal life response would be, okay, you're allowed to believe whatever you believe. I'm just telling you what I think. I've learned a long time ago in life that it's generally a waste of my time to try to convince somebody that what I believe to be true is the truth that they should believe as well, because that just is not typically how people work. So I don't have a strong need to be believed or seen a certain way, and so when it carries over into my game playing, into a game like a social deduction game, I'm like, all right, you don't believe that I'm that character? Whatever, that's fine. And so I'm not so good at playing these type of games. Having said all that, though, we did play this a lot during that Christmas gathering. This is the game that, after the gifts were exchanged, this is the one that we broke out, put on the table, and quickly learned and played. I will say in its favor that it is very easy to learn and to start playing. Being a one-night game, it plays quite quickly and is pretty effortless, especially when you use the app for the gameplay. And everybody had a great time. The adults and the kids that were participating had fun with it. My rating, like I said, is 3 out of 10, but that's not a reflection on the fact that I just really enjoyed being with my family, with my brothers and nieces and nephews and sons, and just sitting around, you know, just playing this kind of light social deduction game and having a good time. So it provided me with an experience that I enjoyed, but as far as a type of game that it is, it's just not my cup of tea, if that makes any sense. The next game is one that I talked about in my previous monthly gaming video, so I'll just cover it quickly here. It's a game called Quarriors, one of the games that I got for Evan for Christmas. This time I played it just 2 players with me and Evan. It's really quick with the 2 of us, since we both already know how the game plays, and it doesn't take long to play a 2-player game. I won this one by just playing monsters early and often and culling down to 6 dice, so that I was rolling the 6 same dice every turn. And I found, just in my limited experiences of a handful of plays over the past couple of months of Quarriors, is that the strategy is kind of non-existent, in the fact that the one I pursued is the one that just seems to have won every time, which is just get every monster out in play that you possibly can, purchase the best die that you can with the remaining spending money you have, and then go on to the next turn. And from there, it's just rolling your dice and seeing what happens to come up. So there's not really much nuance. I know there are different things you could do in terms of keeping back monsters to try to purchase better dice, but the game isn't necessarily long enough to reward holding back early in the game to try to get good stuff. So in terms of my own experience, it's not so much a strategic game as just chucking some dice and having some fun playing with my son, which again, I value a great deal. It's an experience I enjoy, sitting down with Evan and just chucking these cool dice and seeing what happens. Evan loves this game. I rate it 5.5 out of 10, but his rating is 9 out of 10, so I'm sure I will continue to enjoy playing it with Evan. The next one is the other new one that I acquired at Christmas time, and that is Prehistories, a fairly light family level game that I picked up for this Christmas gift exchange. I played it 3 players with Evan and Wyatt, and like I said, it's quite a light kind of auction game to acquire tiles, and then tile laying game to place those tiles on your own board in such a way as to maximize the points that you're working towards for the game. So although it is a very basic game, it is pretty solid with its design. It has a variable scoring system where there's only a few different types of scoring that will be in play in any given game. If I remember correctly, the box says it's a 2 to 5 player game, but I really think it would be at its best with 3 to 4 players. And we all thought it was a good game. I rated it 6 out of 10. Evan, my older son, rated it 7.5 out of 10, and Wyatt, he was the one who acquired the game, gave it an 8.5 out of 10. But the real telling factor is that the boys haven't requested to play it again since, and that's really my biggest metric of how successful a game is with my boys, is if they are very quickly asking for repeat plays, then I know it's a hit with them. If they're just letting it sit on the shelf and not coming back to it again, I know it's not necessarily a big hit. So despite their quite high ratings of the game, we haven't been back to this one. I think as a family weight experience and kind of an introduction to a tile laying type of game, it's pretty decent, but there's not a ton there for an experienced gamer to enjoy a lot, I don't think. Though, as I've mentioned in the past, I am a sucker for prehistoric themes for whatever reason, so the theme definitely stands out to me as being fun, and the artwork along with it. The next one is another 2-player game with one of my sons. This time I played with Wyatt, and we played Castle Panic. This is a cooperative family level game where you're playing kind of a tower defense situation where your castle is under attack by all these monsters who are coming in from the forest, and you have to fight them off and prevent your castle from being destroyed. And Wyatt just loves this game. It's definitely one of his favorite games, and so he asked to play it with me, and the 2 of us played it together. We managed to pull off a win. We do have a couple of expansions with the game. We have the Wizard's Tower, and we have one of the promos, and you do have to be careful with this game not to just throw everything into the game, but to be selective about the starting assortment of monsters that you're playing with, because you will lose the game if you throw everything in there, and the game will just be excruciatingly long. So yes, the game does have some interesting things going on in terms of card play and working together to figure out how to defeat the monsters. But on the other hand, it is a little tedious. It can drag on a bit. I rate the game 6.5 out of 10, but Wyatt gives it a perfect 10 out of 10. Like I said, he just loves this game, and so it was really fun to be able to play it with him again. Oh, look at that. The next game was also a 2-player game, this time back with Evan. And I got to pull out one of my new acquisitions that I had gotten at Christmas time. So my Patreon supporters made it possible for me to purchase a couple of games. And in fact, a couple of the Patreon supporters even stepped up to give me a little bit extra for Christmas time. So like I mentioned in my December games video, I did acquire some new games that were just purchased for my own fun in December. So huge thank you to my Patreon supporters, to Charles M, Mojo Dam, Saver Girl, Abe O, Joanna N, and especially to Osmandas Pervec. Not only is he my highest tier supporter, but he also did give me a board game gift certificate so I could go out and get a couple of games. It makes a huge difference to me. I don't want to go on about my personal situation, but if you're able to contribute just a couple bucks a month and help me out in that manner, then please do check out my Patreon. Appreciate you a lot. But this game is Spies and Lies, a Stratego game. And the reason I picked it up was because I saw it in a shop. I saw that it was just this little 2-player game. It was on sale for quite a cheap price, and the word Stratego caught my attention because Stratego was a game that as a child I really enjoyed playing, where you had this big board with all your military units that were only facing you, so your opponent didn't know which unit was which, and then you had to march across the board, meet up with your opponent's units, reveal them, and see which one was the stronger one to win the fight, and eventually work towards attempting to find your opponent's flag and to capture the flag. So Stratego was something that I grew up with, and so I have a lot of positive association with the Stratego name. And so I thought, you know what, I'm going to give this little two-player game a try. And it was a fun experience. This version of it is card-based. Essentially, you're choosing a secret assortment of, I think, 6 soldiers for each side to face off each other for a total of 3 rounds maximum, I believe, although the game can end early. And essentially, you're trying to guess what each soldier in your opponent's lineup is, what that specific soldier is. If you guess correctly, you kind of remove them from the combat. If you don't guess correctly, then they have a special ability that triggers to attack you or give your opponent points or whatever. And it's not just pure guesswork, though. There are some structures of the game that give you an idea of who might be what in your opponent's row there, and you get more information as you go through the row. So there is this kind of bluffing and deduction element, which I'm also a huge sucker for. I love games that have a deduction element in them, and so I did quite enjoy that aspect of the game. Though, to be fair, at the end of the day, it's just kind of a guessing game. You're just guessing back and forth and trying to hope you set it up in such a way that your opponent can't guess correctly. Anyways, when I played with Evan, it's so funny how he and I are on just such similar wavelengths. We, I think, chose the same assortment of soldier cards for the first rounds that we faced each other off, where they were almost identical anyways. But the problem is, I know him so well that even after that first round going forward, I guessed really remarkably well about how he had laid out his attack line each round. And so I was able to pull off the victory just because I was able to get inside his head pretty successfully. So unfortunately for Evan, I just know him way too well and beat him in this game. I ended up rating the game 6.5 out of 10. Evan rates it a 7 out of 10, which is an okay rating, but for my kids who tend to rate games quite high if they like them, this is an indicative of a game that he's probably not going to ask to come back to again with me, unfortunately. I would love to try this with an adult opponent, though. It is kind of a cool game. There's some interesting stuff going on there, although it's not my favorite two-player game in existence, obviously. And talking about two-player games, I got back to chess again on my phone. Playing against these AI opponents sort of prompted me to look up what chess ratings mean. Like, you see these players who are rated 1700 or 2000 or 2500 for some of the really highly ranked chess players. What are they, ELO ratings or something like that? So I decided to look it up, and the impression I got, I could be completely wrong by a quick Google search, but it looks like you're not a decent chess player until you're ranked about 1500. Then once you hit about 1700, you're getting pretty good, and then it goes up from there. So I thought, okay, that's interesting. I decided I would play a 1500 ranked AI, and I lost to that AI twice, but then on my third attempt I finally beat that AI. So it was satisfying to get that victory, and my next challenge is a 1600 ranked AI opponent. I continue to play the chess puzzles almost daily too, which is both fun and I think does help to improve my game a little bit. So I continue to enjoy that app. The next two games are games that I would say are kind of family level adult games, in that these are the games that you're kind of stepping out of kids games into the adult game category. And so I've been kind of waiting to try them with my kids, and both of these are ones that I played 3-player with my boys. The first one was K2, a game I've raved about in many previous months. It's a game where you are mountaineers who are attempting to get your climbers up as high as possible without actually dying. For my kids' first experience of this game, we played on one of the quicker mountains where the game is shorter and there's kind of less to think about. Evan actually ended up winning by getting both of his climbers to the peak of the mountain somehow. So he did really well with this game. This is a game that I rate 8.5 out of 10. I just love this little game. In the past, when I played it with Paul, he has rated it 7.5 out of 10. But as for my boys, Wyatt gives it a 7 out of 10 and Evan an 8.5 out of 10. Again, though, it's just not one they've requested to play again. So that's, like I said, is kind of the true test of how much they enjoy the game. This next one that we played 3-player is called Colt Express. This is a game that's been sitting on my shelf for ages because it is a game that you need at least 3 players. With K2, I can play 2-player games with Paul, for instance, and we can enjoy that game as a 2-player experience. But Colt Express is one of those games of several on my shelf that are waiting until I have more than 2 players to play with. So I finally got Colt Express played with my kids. It is a programming type of game where we have different action cards that allow our cowboy to run around on this 3D cardboard train and try to get loot and knock the other players around. But it's all done in this programming sense where we each take turns laying down an action card. Some of them are revealed, some of them are hidden until we've all chosen the actions we're going to do for the round. Then we flip that deck over and we go one at a time, and each character does one action at a time, and we have to see how our pre-planned actions worked out and whether or not they've got completely messed up by what the other players are doing on the train there. So it is a ton of fun, provides a lot of laughs, as these programming games tend to do when your plans get kind of scuppered by the actions of other players. I ended up winning this game. I beat Evan out by a bit, but Wyatt was way behind. He never really kind of figured out the flow of this game. I rated 9 out of 10. I think really highly of this game. Evan ended up giving it an 8 out of 10, and then for Wyatt it was a 7.5 out of 10. And once again, the true test is they haven't come back to request a repeat play, sadly. But regardless, I was just really happy to finally get that one to the table again, because it's been some years since I've been able to play Colt Express. And then my number 1 for the month is one of my favorite games of all time, and that is No Limit Texas Hold'em, with a couple of asterisks on this one. So the first one being is that I played it on Board Game Arena because they have just newly implemented No Limit Texas Hold'em as a game to play on BGA there. And so we're playing without money. First of all, we're playing just with chips or points or whatever you want to call it, which is the first major issue, because I've always said that games like Texas Hold'em, poker in general, are just not fun to play without money. You need those stakes to make it an interesting game. Otherwise, you can play just totally wildly and just let luck carry the day. You need those real stakes to kind of make that play interesting. And then the second part of that is I only played heads up. I actually ended up playing one-on-one against one of my brothers. So he played from home and we just played online on the website there. And again, Heads Up Texas Hold'em is a very different game from playing with like 6-8 players around a table. For me, it's not as interesting or fun a way to play Hold'em. And then the other problem with playing it on this particular website was I really did find they had some user interface issues. For example, playing it on my PC, I couldn't have the whole table on screen. So the table was off screen and I had to constantly scroll down to see what my brother did, whether he bet, raised, passed, whatever, and then scroll up to do my actions and scroll down to see what he was doing. So the user interface had a couple of issues like that. You know, we're playing for points, not for money. It's just the two of us. But really, it was just fun to practice my heads-up game, because I think it's probably a weak point in my own poker play. Typically, when I play poker, it'll be with a larger group of people. It's been many years since I've played kind of tournament style with friends. We used to get together every month with a group of people and play tournament Texas Hold'em, so basically raising blinds until there was only one final winner at the table. And so that was a ton of fun, and something I miss a great deal because that group kind of split up many years ago now, and the only time or two that I've hosted a poker game since then has just been a cash game where we don't have player elimination and we just kind of sit around and have some fun flinging some cards around. So like I said, it was fun to practice my heads up game. It was fun to play with my brother. I do rate Texas Hold'em as a game 9.5 out of 10, but in terms of an experience playing it on Board Game Arena, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. Unless you really need to get your poker fix without losing money, then maybe it's a good option. So that was my month of January. What games have you been playing recently? What have you been really enjoying? Are there any upcoming titles that you're anxious to try? I would love to hear all about it. Please do get into the comments and let me know. And thank you so much for watching. Cheers. Yes, and so I want to make one of the games is, so I won't go on for much. Purchased the bet. It is it. The next two games are games that are playing one on